Hello, welcome to the QMS Certification channel. My name is Hart. Here at QMS we talk a lot about ISO certifications, but in today's video we're going to talk about a subject you might be wondering about, which is, where do I start implementing ISO 9001 in my organization? Before we start, I'm going to ask you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We produce regular content every week. You'll find news right here, so don't forget to click on the little button to receive our news in your feed. Well, when we think about the certification process, we first must take a step back. Considering that the company first needs to implement a management system in its organization. When it decides to obtain a certification, it has a long way to go before it achieves this very important feat for the organization. So, a lot. It's very common for organizations to contact QMS directly as a certifying body, seeking certification, without knowing the whole path that needs to be taken before that. So today the aim of this video is for us to talk about this path, about how it can work, and not just in your organization. An initial step, without a doubt, is to get to know the standard and familiarize yourself with it. This goes for ISO 9001 and any other standard of choice that your organization wants to adopt. So, when you decide to get certified, the first thing is to go to the official portals, the sites for buying the standard. All ISO standards and management systems are available in several languages, and you can choose the easiest way to familiarize yourself with these standards through auditor training courses or standard interpretation courses. So a good way to familiarize yourself with a management system standard, especially ISO 9001, is through a standard interpretation course or internal auditor training, or even a more complete course with lead auditor training, and usually such a training course lasts around 40 hours. In any case, it is very important that your organization acquires the standard. Acquire this document through the official portals. Once you are familiar with the standard, you need to get the commitment of your organization's top management to ensure that all the requirements are supported by the leadership. They will have the support of the organization's management in terms of the resources needed for you to be able to implement this standard properly. What are these resources? What does this involve? It involves financial resources, as you may be thinking, but also the availability of time and the availability of the people who are there, who participate in the organization. In terms of competence, this also makes a big difference. What's more, it's very important for the organization to promote the engagement of the people, the other people who take part in the processes. So, when we think about implementing ISO 9001, you always have to consider that it's not just the person responsible for quality in the organization who will be in charge of the whole project. It needs the cooperation not only of senior management, but also the engagement of people in operations. HR, purchasing, sales, everyone must be involved in this major project for the organization. It is therefore very important that the top management, the main leadership of the company, supports and is supporting to promote the integration of these parties and the participation of everyone in the project. At this point, you can consider using consultants to support this project within your company, as part of setting up an implementation team. So, whether through consultancy support or the formation of an internal team, you can start the process of implementing the given management system standard based on an ISO standard in your company. So, once you have the support, you know the standard, and you have the people available, now you just have to get started. And where do I start? You start at the beginning of all standards and management systems. They are planned according to the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check and act. They all have this cycle of thinking, reasoning, and the way they are drawn up. This will also be reflected in the management system that you are going to implement. So all the management system standards today start with requirement 4, which talks about the context of the organization. This means that you're going to start the implementation by thinking about the actual planning of this management system and the planning of your organization. So, 4.1 is certainly the requirement that will give you an overview of what the context is, where this organization is inserted, what is good, and what the starting point is. Where do you know your organization's strengths lie? What opportunities do you see in implementing this standard? And you'll also be able to identify weaknesses. Where do you need to improve, and what threats are there in the market? Who are your competitors? Who are we competing with here? So it's very important to start at the beginning, really at the beginning of the standard. So, a good starting point is to do this contextual analysis, to evaluate the objectives you are aiming for as a second step. Then, once you've understood where you're starting from, you can set some objectives for this management system. So, following the flow of the standard, first you assess the organization internally. Then you'll assess the scope of what you want to certify your organization does, and what the main processes are. Then, based on this scope, you will determine exactly what the processes are, who will be involved, which units of my organization will be involved in this certification, who are the main leaders I need to count on here. All of this will still be part of a planning stage within the PDCA cycle, but we're still talking about P. Next, you establish who is involved. What are the objectives of your management system, and where do you want to get to? What metrics are you going to set for this management system? Then you can start the actual implementation. You can start drawing up documentation. So you've already done the context analysis, risk analysis, you've already defined the scope, you've already defined the people, you've already got the whole infrastructure. And if I'm talking about any management system standard, especially ISO 9001, which was a pioneer in this structure, then you can plan the documentation you need to draw up. So, all the ISO standards require the retention of documented information. They require you to write procedures or document procedures. It can be in writing, it can be online, it can be on video, whichever way makes the most sense. One very important thing is for companies that are implementing ISO standards to understand that the standard itself will never tell you how to implement that requirement. It will tell you what should be done, what are the best market practices in this area, in the area of quality, occupational safety, or information security. What should be done? What do you need to implement as a requirement? How are you going to implement it? It depends a lot on your context and what you've already analyzed. It depends on your company's culture. It depends on the value that senior management places on that issue and the complexity of what you do. So, the way it's done will vary incredibly from company to company, because that's the beauty of ISO 9001. It applies to any company, anywhere in the world, of any size, in any segment. So the standard will never be prescriptive in terms of how to do things, but rather what you need to do to ensure that your management system is adequate and effective. Well, finally, once you've planned the whole system, have you put it into operation or understood what the critical points of your management system and your operation are? Now we come to part C of the PDC, which is the check. So you're going to check, do an internal check first, an internal audit that will be conducted within the organization by someone who is trained as an internal auditor in your company or by someone you've hired to do this internal audit and check what improvement points still need to be addressed before certification. Once the internal audit has been completed, you will also conduct a critical analysis meeting, raise the main points, present the results, discuss with the leadership which were the main aspects that were developed, elaborated, and resolved, the points of concern and the points of opportunity that were identified and dealt with. Carrying out this internal audit and critical analysis with management. Are you ready for your certification audit? At that point, you can hire the certification body that is certification to take part in your company's day-to-day operations, to be there, to carry out an audit, to get to know your organization, to assess how you have tried to meet certain requirements, and, on the basis of that audit, if everything goes well, you will finally achieve ISO certification. So that's the step-by-step. the entire path that an organization needs to follow to obtain certification. If you want to know more about this step-by-step process and how certification works, stay tuned and look out for our next videos on the QMS channel.